Welcome back to the Talk Up Radio Show, the voice of the Jamaican youth on Nationwide 90 FM. Now, in this segment, we have an extra special guest. She is the foremost global advocate addressing the needs and rights of young people, particularly across the UN system. We're very happy to welcome to Talk Up Radio the United Nations Secretary General's Envoy on Youth, Jayathma Wickramanayake. Welcome to the show, Jayathma. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me, Chris.
I'm so excited to talk to you. Guys, as you know, I am a UN SVG Young Leader, so Jayathma, the Office of the Youth Envoy, directly organizes that program. So I'm familiar with her, so this is fantastic for me, so I'm just very excited to jump in. But since you guys are meeting her probably for the first time, I'll just have to ask you, who is Jayathma?
That's a very deep question.
So
Thank you very much. First of all, let me congratulate you, Chris, for your leadership and what amazing work you did as a young leader in the past 2 years. I think you were really a great example for not just young people in Jamaica, but around the world as to how you can use your skills and talent and power to bring a difference. Who is Jayathma? I'm 29 years old. I'm from Sri Lanka. I currently serve as the UN Secretary General Special Envoy for Youth. I advise the UN Secretary General and I represent him in matters and issues that are related to young people. I work in the United Nations headquarters in New York with my team, but I work with youth organizations, young people, youth serving organizations, civil society, government, all stakeholders around the world.
I mean, that's fantastic, and I am so familiar with your work and so excited to share some of it with Talk Up Radio fans and audiences, and I'm so thankful for your kind words as well. But let's jump in. So we have this foreign correspondent series here on Talk Up Radio where we talk to young people from different countries, but we've never spoken to anyone from Sri Lanka. So of course, I have to ask you to tell us a little bit about Sri Lanka.
Yeah, so actually Sri Lanka, like Jamaica, is also an island. It's a very small country in the Indian Ocean. It's under India, but above the Maldives. Some say it's the shape of a pearl, some say it's the shape of a teardrop. So you can get an idea how it is like. We have a population of about 22 million people. The majority of our population is Sinhalese, and then we have Tamils and Muslims and other minority groups in the country as well. Also, religions would be Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, and Christianity. And so it's a very multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious country. It's very beautiful. It was last year the world's top tourist destination or something. But with its beauty, it also has its own challenges. So my country has gone through a 30-year-long war, and also have faced several challenges throughout its 2,500-year-old history, but it's also a very inspiring country in the sense that even though it's a developing country, we have a very strong education and healthcare system that is absolutely free for everyone. We have also produced the world's first female prime minister or head of state. So there are a lot of good things, but there are also different challenges that we as a country have faced. And if you don't know what Sri Lanka is, I highly encourage you to look it up.
I do as well. It sounds like there's so much to learn from such a country. All right, so we said already that you are the United Nations Special Envoy on Youth to the Secretary General. But when you got that role a couple of years ago, what were your priorities in the role? Is there anything specific that you wanted to accomplish?
Yeah, I mean, for the UN, this year we celebrated the 75th birthday or the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, and it's an old organization. It's been here for 75 years. It was founded for a specific purpose of maintaining international peace and security after the Second World War. But in the past 75 years, the organization has faced so many different challenges. I mean, our world itself has faced so many different challenges. But as a very hierarchical, formal, bureaucratic institution, we haven't really been able to adapt with the fast pace that our world around us is adapting. So as the reforms package that the UN Secretary General introduced, youth and youth engagement is an important element. So currently, half of the world's population is under the age of 30, and this is the largest generation of young people our world has ever seen. So my aim or my goal really is to make sure that the UN is an institution that constantly engages with young people, that works with national governments to empower them, and also ensures their participation in issues that affect their future, because young people and future generations will live with the consequences of the decisions that are made today. So that engagement, empowerment, and participation are the three key big goals that I have for this role. And obviously it doesn't just happen through the Secretary General, it happens through entire UN system, from our UN agencies like UNICEF or UNFPA or UNDP or WFP or others. It happens through our UN headquarters, regional offices, country offices. So it's a huge network of different UN entities and bodies around the world, and kind of coordinating with them and giving them the information and the tools that they need is my second goal, to make sure that we can reach our first goal. So in 2018, I worked with the Secretary General and the rest of the UN system to develop something called the UN's Youth Strategy. So it's called Youth 2030. Again, I encourage everyone to take a look at it. It's about how the United Nations should engage with young people, not just to work for young people, but work with them in partnership. And it outlines key priority areas, key principles we need to keep in mind when we work with young people, because often young people are seen as beneficiaries of UN processes, but they're also experts, and they can also contribute as equal partners to our work. And the idea behind the strategy really is to recognize that leadership, expertise, and bring those contributions to the work of the organization.
I mean, absolutely. You know, as somebody who has read the strategy, I can tell you to go and look it up right now, because it's such, you know, all of these things that we as young people know about engagement and how we feel sometimes as, you know, just beneficiaries, not as experts of our own experience, and not being tapped in ways that we can meaningfully be engaged. When you read that strategy, you see recognition of those issues, and it really is hopeful for, you know, better engagement going forward. So I'm very excited to encourage everybody to go and read that. But speaking of the UN Secretary General, now I've read this a couple times all over the place. You're always talking about it. When you were confirmed in this role, the SG asked you to misbehave. Now, it sounds amazing, but what did he mean by that?
It's a very interesting instruction that you get from your boss, you know, like usually your boss would want you to abide by the rules and regulations of the organization. Well, but what he basically meant is that if I see something in the organization that needs to change, or if I see something that doesn't work, or if I have a new idea that could be brought in to improve our work better, then I'm free to do that. He also often tells me that, you know, you can first implement your idea and ask for permission later, because, you know, because of that very bureaucratic and hierarchical nature of our organization, every single thing has to go through like different layers of approvals and you know, decisions and signatures and memos and all of that, and sometimes it's important for accountability, definitely, but it's also sometimes kind of keep us away from innovating. It keeps us away from finding new solutions where you're already comfortable with the solutions that are available, and you know if you want to bring a new solution, then you have to go through this whole process, which could be daunting. So his instruction to me to misbehave is really to find these kind of new ways of working, positively disrupt the working culture, the working nature, and the working methods of the organization in order to bring about more diverse, more inclusive voices and opinions to the work of the United Nations.
Yeah. And obviously, like, taking into consideration safety and that kind of thing, but would you also encourage youth leaders, activists, to take that sort of, groundbreaking approach, going behind what is established as protocol or what is established as how we should be behaving, and misbehave sometimes when given a seat at decision-making tables? Say the things that nobody wants to say, that are speak truth to power, that get to the heart of the issue, and break the rules sometimes to really make radical changes that improve people's lives.
Definitely. I mean, I have to say though, I often learn how to misbehave from other young people. I mean, I look at people like you, Chris. I look at our young leaders. I look at people like Greta Thunberg, who misbehaved. I look at people like Malala. I look at people like, Jamie Margolin or others who are really on the front lines. I look at the young women in South Sudan who took to the streets to bring a democratic revolution in their country. I look at young people in Belarus right now, in Poland, in Hong Kong. And I really take my inspiration from there. If they could risk their lives to speak the truth, then I don't have an excuse not to do that within the comforts of and the protection of this organization. So I think young people out there are putting so much on the line to create a better future, not just for themselves, but for the generations to come. So as institutions, the least we can do is to actually support them and provide them the platforms to misbehave, and also protect them when they face retaliation from state and non-state actors for speaking up and for misbehaving. So for an example, we try to do a lot of things which are called, the first initiative in the UN. We had the first advisory board on youth and climate to the Secretary General just a few weeks ago. We had the first Youth Climate Summit last year at the General Assembly. We had the first youth plenary for the UN's 75th birthday this year. So a lot of the things that we do are, considered first, like the first global forum on youth policies, the first symposium on youth participation in peace processes, is because it has never been done before, and because as an office and as an envoy who works for young people who are already speaking out and out there, I think it's my responsibility to be able to create those spaces for those young people to misbehave.
Absolutely. I mean, it sounds fantastic. And of course, we at Talk Up Radio love to misbehave. And our executive producer, Empress Golding, encourages us to misbehave. So this is really fantastic. So we're going to take a break. Stay with me, Jayathma, and our audience. When we come back, we have more with the UN Secretary General's Envoy on Youth. On Nationwide 90 FM. Now, as you know, we're having this fantastic conversation with the United Nations Secretary General's Envoy on Youth, Jayathma Wickramanayake. Are you still there, Jayathma?
I'm right here.
All right. So let's jump back in. A while ago, before we left, you were telling us, a lot of what it means to really push the boundaries and to get change done. And you mentioned so many amazing young leaders who inspire me every day to really try harder and to really get some of the work done. So let's talk about that a bit. So at Talk Up Radio, we also talk to a lot of youth leaders and activists around the world. And even though they're really dedicated to making change, as you said, they often face significant challenges from established systems, traditions, many of which underestimate them and their voices. How's it been for you, just your experience now, having such a major leadership role on the global stage?
Yeah, I mean, it's it's never easy for young people, I feel, and particularly also for women. And being a young person, being a woman, and being a woman of color has itself brought, I think, different challenges to me personally and also to my work. I've often found when people expect an envoy, and when I enter into a room, people ask, so where's the envoy? Because they don't think an envoy can look like I do, because they're so used to seeing probably like a white man in a suit as an envoy. So these kind of stereotypes and myths and misconceptions about what expertise means, what experience means, what leadership means, what global leadership means especially, it has definitely, I would say, had an not necessarily an impact, but I would say it's been a challenge at certain times. But I've also been really lucky to have a very supportive support system really here in the UN, with the Secretary General asking me to misbehave, and with the Deputy Secretary General and the leadership of the United Nations really sort of standing behind me and supporting me. That has been sort of a reinforcement for the work that I needed to do, because often if I wanted to change something, I've had people would call me and be like, well, I've been here for 30 years and it worked fine, and you're here for 2 months and you're trying to change this, it can't happen. And this type of things often happen, especially when you try to change processes, because when you're comfortable with the process, people don't really like to change them. And of course, because you are young, people often think you don't have the experience that you need to do a global role like this, or perform a global role like this. So these kind of sort of comments and stereotypes have affected my work, but I found always the best way to respond to those is to perform better and show results, and show how changing certain things and bringing new and different and inclusive perspectives can change the work of the United Nations better. Absolutely. So if it is that difficult for me to be in an international organization, a global organization, a forward-looking organization, to be honest, like that, I can imagine how difficult it must be for young people to engage with their own institutions in their own countries. For an example, we have seen how there are legal restrictions of age when it comes to, say, running for political office or doing certain jobs, or sometimes minimum wage depends on how old you are. And these type of sort of age-based discrimination often happens not just in a social and cultural manner, but also sometimes in a very legal manner. And I often use these examples to talk about the visible and invisible challenges that young people face in doing their work. But I think we can all learn from the many young people who have broken those barriers, or basically who didn't really care about those barriers and were empowered and privileged enough to bring about lasting change in their communities.
Absolutely. And I mean, what you're saying is ringing particularly true here right now, because just last week we had on air with us Jamaica's youngest ever senator, just appointed. She's 23 years old, and I mean, she's been such a beacon of hope to so many young people across the island that no position is outside of their reach. No public office is beyond their capabilities. So, I'm just very excited to be able to add to that conversation just the impact that young people can have when we dare to dream and dare to go above and beyond. So speaking of that, and the support system that you spoke about, your office directly manages the Young Leaders for the SDGs program. And I know this because I am a 2018 SVG Young Leader. And, having seen the ways that you guys have supported us in our work and just, been such a guiding hand and a helping, and just an ear sometimes, sometimes we have challenges that it's just good to be able to ask somebody who has a greater scope of the space how, we could possibly get through that particular challenge though. So in your words, who are the SDG Young Leaders and why is this program important?
Yes, so for the SVG Young Leaders, since its inception, the idea has been that we would recognize exceptional individuals, young people in fashion to finance to media to science to education, and really help them elevate their messages to a different scale. So, in the SVG Young Leaders program, what we are looking for is that you are a innovator, that you have your own idea, that you have your own project, and you're trying through very creative and different ways to reach other young people and peers in your community, to educate them about the Sustainable Development Goals and to promote the Sustainable Development Goals, embody the values of the Sustainable Development Goals in your day-to-day life and your day-to-day work and in your company and in your sector, and at the end of the day contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals through the industry or the sector that they are working in. So it's a very competitive program. For the first class, I think we got about 17,000 applications, and then we had to make the criteria very, very strict. And then in the subsequent years, we've got 9,000, 8,000 applications every time we open applications, and it goes through a very rigorous selection process because we really want to identify who receives this prestigious platform, and we can only select 17 young people, and we want to make sure that they are the most deserving of this platform. And it's really it's not a platform in the sense where you would get any sort of concrete, say, financial support, or you would get to do your own project or anything. And Chris, you know this better. It's really a platform for you to ask, to use for your advocacy, to amplify your work, and by being recognized as a SVG Young Leader, it gives you certain access to institutions, it gives you opportunities to network, it gives you opportunities to go to conferences, meetings, and meet other people, build networks. And our hope is that through those engagements, that young leaders will amplify their work and find funding opportunities and find partnerships. So if you look at the program, it's really a bridge builder, where we kind of identify exceptional individuals, we bring them together into a platform, and we build a bridge for them to connect with every different stakeholder that we as the United Nations work with. And we put a lot of responsibility on the young leaders to kind of, be very proactive in the way they approach these different platforms and make their connections and advance their work. But I'm really happy to see the two previous classes of young leaders have really used those opportunities for good. And I'm also very excited about the newly launched class of young leaders, and they really look like a very enthusiastic bunch.
Yes, I was so excited to see them recently when it was launched. All right, speaking of young people and, the state of youth development globally, seeing as you interact so regularly with youth from so many different countries, from that perspective, what do you think are some of the major challenges young people are facing, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, and will face throughout the next decade, the decade of action?
Yeah, I mean, Chris, even before the COVID-19 pandemic, the world wasn't really a 100% best place for young people. We had very high youth unemployment rates. Before the pandemic, about 71 million young people were unemployed. 1 in 5 young people were not in employment, education, or training. Close to 47% of young people who are employed actually were working in the informal sector without any social protection, insurance, or any sort of support systems. Youth mental health challenges were skyrocketing. Young women and girls who are being married at a young age, who are having children when they're children themselves, about 15 million children become teenage mothers every year. So the challenges facing young people were already very stark before the pandemic, and obviously the COVID-19 pandemic exposed those vulnerabilities and inequalities, but it also added on additional layers of discrimination and challenges through these young people, and it's really a very difficult time when you think about the months and years to come, particularly with regards to employment and education, because about 1.5 billion young people education was disrupted during the pandemic, and it's going to have a lasting impact on their futures. So I think generally when I talk to young people from around the world, these are the key issues that they usually talk to me about. So lack of access to quality education and decent job opportunities are clearly two major issues that everyone is facing, but also young people are really worried about the impacts of climate change, particularly young people from developing countries who are facing the impacts of climate change, small island developing states, sub-Saharan Africa, but have done really nothing to create the climate catastrophe. So they talk about climate justice and how they have to pay for the mistakes that they didn't commit. Peace and security, about 408 million young people currently live in areas affected by conflict. So the conflict is having profound impacts in their lives and the way they shape themselves as they transition from childhood to adulthood. COVID-19 has also exacerbated mental health challenges among young people because of the uncertainties of their future, but also the stress and the fear and anxiety the pandemic itself has created. And all of this, and then I also hear a lot of sort of mistrust that young people are developing towards their political institutions, because we have seen even during the pandemic how certain governments actually, or certain political leaders, prioritized profit over people's health and lives, and didn't really take the appropriate measures to curtail the pandemic, to protect the lives of people and support the most poor, most vulnerable communities in their country. So this has rather increased the mistrust that young people already had towards political institutions, and I think it's very worrying, because we do want young people to be involved in political processes. We want them to vote, we want them to run for office, but if they don't have trust in their governments, they will further alienate themselves from the formal political processes, and that will not look good for our future, because we really need to get young people involved in the making and implementation of policies that will impact our future. So in a nutshell, I would say, and in broad strokes, these are the biggest issues that young people from around the world have shared with me, and I'm pretty sure many of these resonate with you in Jamaica as well. But again, I want to say before I end that many young people are not just complaining about these issues, they're actually trying to do something to solve those issues in their individual capacities, through their families, through their schools and universities. It could be volunteering for a project, or founding a social movement, or writing a petition. In some way, young people find ways to fix the problems that they are faced with. But I think as governments and as the UN and international actors, we can do so much more to make this situation better for young people.
Absolutely. All right, so we have to wrap it up. We have to leave it there, but I'm so thankful that you were able to join us today. And I do want to encourage everybody to go and follow the Youth Envoy. That's UN Youth Envoy. She shares so many amazing stories from around the world, a lot of information, anything that you might need as a young leader is really all right there. I also want to thank your team, because they've been so supportive in getting this to fruition. So thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to us today, Jayathma.
Thank you so much, Chris.
All right, that's it. That was the UN Youth Envoy, Jayathma Wickramanayake. Stay tuned. We have more after this break. You're listening to Talk Up Radio on Nationwide 90 FM. Talk Up Youth, Masefi. Talk Up Youth.